All right, chat. How does it sound now?
We're back.
I
Can you hear us
apologize.
now?
I was doing my Super Chrono 64 impression. Getting ready for Halloween. You know,
Yes.
that's going to be my costume
Yeah.
for Halloween. So sweet.
Everybody does know that the Father Time is the best
Yeah.
Chrono skin. So, yeah, thanks. Production came and sorted us out, and they also turned the lights on. So,
I know, right?
Right
we're better
now.
lit now, so that's great.
I know, right? In focus, better lit. We
Yes.
sound good. It's Friday.
It's Friday.
It's a good time for Titan Talk, you know? So I apologize for the audio issues, but yeah, we're going to talk about Closed Alpha 4 that went live yesterday. Already had a couple hotfixes go out,
Yep.
which is insane. Less than 24 hours
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
2 hotfixes
We're
already.
moving quick.
We're moving fast. Lermy's here. She's going to talk about some more balance.
We are balanced.
We got some stats from Max, who's going to be on the show on Monday.
To talk about matchmaking.
Yep. So let's get right into it, shall we?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'm
I'm
going to bring up
excited.
hotfix notes on the laptop for what went live today. These are on Steam and on social media. So we had some bug fixes from today. On PC, we fixed an issue where Danzaburow's ultimate didn't always explode on contact.
That's a big one.
Also fixed an issue where Danzaburo, he could fire his ultimate twice. It's another big one.
Yep.
And we're also have an attempted fix for voice chat in parties of certain sizes where voice chat wouldn't work. So all those are live on PC, and then we've got console coming out in a little bit, within the hour or so, hopefully, with more fixes for the gamepad players not being able to get past the new fancy. You haven't done your Divine Legacy linking yet. You should
Yes.
probably go do that to get your rewards. Also, the fixes for Danzaburo coming to console in an hour or so. The voice chat fix as well. And then also for console, some of the stuff that was fixed in yesterday's hotfix is also going to be coming a little bit later today, where you fixed an issue where Hercules' voice wasn't working in lobby, fixed an issue where Neith's ultimate wouldn't cancel her backing animation, fixed an issue where filters on the God roster screen were broken, and also fixed an issue where enemy player entries for players who didn't pick showed a picture of Chalk instead when the draft lobby ended.
Oops, all chalks.
Oops, all Chalks, for sure. And then I've got a list from Alex and Kabir on the team.
Yeah, and before we get to that, just real quick, like, you know, one thing that you'll see us do, right, is we can ship PC patches a little bit more quickly than we can ship console patches. And if we can get into a state where we can update the PC version without breaking the console version, we will oftentimes ship a fix to PC first, which is why you see these split patch notes here. So console will be getting the updates just a little bit later, but they've still been able to play in the same environment with PC, and we didn't break compatibility. So when we have the chance to do that, you know, that's what we'll be doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, and then in terms of more known issues that aren't quite fixed yet, but we are aware of, boom. So under miscellaneous, God portraits appearing hexagonal when previewing Ascension Fast rewards.
Apparently the wrong material was used on those. So that's going to be fixed, but it takes a full build.
Ooh, I'm going to go big screen so chat can read a little bit better too.
Yeah.
Also for Hercules, there's an issue right now where Hercules can push players into geographics.
Yeah,
in
into the
environment.
map itself.
Yeah.
It is not a common thing. There's kind of some edge cases around it. So not enough to where we feel like we need to disable him in live or anything. But it is a bad issue when it happens. So something we're kind of top priority trying to fix.
Yeah. For Hercules, again, there's an issue with the AO2 where targets get stuck in the air after the knockup. And
that's mostly certain parts of the map geography that don't have tall enough walls to prevent them from being knocked up on top.
And then last for Hercules, there's an issue with basic attacks just getting out of sync. So we're going to fix that. In terms of Danzaburo, a lot of stuff for Danzaburo. So there's an issue where all of his mastery skins play the wrong voiceovers in game, so that's going to get fixed. I think it's playing like Ares or something like that for all of his mastery skins. The coin pickup audio is global right now. We're aware of that and working on a fix.
You just don't want to hear him picking up his coins.
Hey, he's getting money, you know? Just got paid Friday. There's an issue with the AO2. Pip showing is gray until they are hit to enemies and allies. Also with the AO2, taunted enemies aren't basic attacking his deployable properly, so working on fixes there. And then for the AO3, the leaf form doesn't have the movement speed increase or for a duration or slow immunity, so that's also getting looked into. Also on the AO3, which is a big one, enemies can tell which leaf he is in when he leaves the area. So enemies should see the same VFX for all the leaves. It's supposed to be confusing. Not quite that way yet, so we're working on a fix there.
Yep.
And then last but not least, minions are targeting / hitting Danzaburo out of leaf form, which is just feels bad. You know?
Not
Used
good.
it for an escape, and then you get clipped by a minion, and then
No more leaf.
You're done. So.
And then a couple other things that have already been fixed in dev and will be going live soonish, I would say. Herc's nameplate has been lowered. We know that it was too high over his head. Basically,
he's a big boy. You know?
He is a big boy, and he can get really big if you apotheosis plus. What's the item?
Dreamer's Idol and Avatar's Parashu.
Yeah.
Between
Yes,
the two
he can be a real big boy.
Yeah.
So it would, and his nameplate was exceptionally high.
Yeah,
so
I saw a post on Reddit where it's like they added the Titan to Arena in SMITE 2, and it was just Hercules and his passive with those two items.
Yeah, seeing like the Final K clip on Twitter.
I know.
Like, look at me, I'm really big.
His passive mentioned CDR, which is no longer a part of the passive that went live. So people thought it was broken. It just doesn't have CDR in it, so it should not be giving you CDR. It just was a typo. And he will be knock-up immune while dashing, which he should be. So those have all been fixed. And we'll be going live soonish.
Soonish, yeah.
So fixed for us, fixed for you all in a little bit. So just keep an eye out on social media channels for any upcoming patch notes for hotfixes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about closed alpha 4. Gosh, I'm still in closed alpha 3 land just because I wasn't expecting the release earlier this week. But yeah, went live yesterday. How are y'all feeling about the update?
In general, so excited. I've been really anticipating a lot of the balance too, just because we did a really big pass to strength overall across the board, removing base strength, turning that into basic attack power instead. So a lot of the characters that you've been seeing have some really strong early game success. I'm thinking like your Susanos. This would also affect like Mordred in a really big way, who were just killing people real fast. And that's mostly because they got free strength. Not anymore. No more free strength.
No more.
Got free strength. And they scaled with strength really heavily on a lot of their, pretty easy DPS abilities, things like that. So they will be affected pretty heavily in balance for those reasons. And so, speaking of balance, right, we've got a cool new chart to take a look at here.
I'm going to pull up this chart from our friend Max here.
Yeah.
And there we go.
Yes, it might be a little bit hard to see depending on things, but this is the kind of
data
that we work with. We work with several of these charts. This is just one of them to look at, but this one specifically is related to the builds that people are going.
Yeah, this is a really cool stat map that Max whipped up.
Oh, absolutely. And so this is determined realistically by doing a bunch of averages and like what counts for strength, int, hybrid, things like that. And as you can see, we have some outliers, right?
Yes.
On a lot of different angles. And they might not be the ones that you're expected either, because you can see across the board, like Nuwa, of course, in the top right, she was kind of perceived to be kind of mid to not very good even really recently, considering she didn't really get picked up that much over the weekend. Her pick rate is still really high because she is popular just across the board. She's popular in SMITE 1 as well, but here you can see she's actually one of the best performers in the game by far, alongside Anubis.
Goob is still doing really well with the int damage build here.
Yes, and we don't want to talk about strength needs.
So I will say, I think for just one interesting thing about this chart is that play rate is almost as important to us as win rate, right? We want to make sure that all the gods are played heavily, especially while we're in alpha. Obviously, we want to make sure that the super overpowered builds on certain characters are addressed, but part of what you haven't seen in this chart over time, because we haven't shown it before, is we've already moved a lot of gods to the right. The diversity of picks within a game has gone up drastically over the past 3 weeks, I would say. So I think the process of what we're doing is working. Yes, you'll see some outliers here that are winning too much or losing too much, but that's okay. And the other thing to note as you're looking at this chart is that there's multiple different builds listed for each god. So people can meme on Strength Neath is real bad right now. Strength Neath is real bad right now, but Int Neath is pretty okay. And I think Hybrid Neath is really good, if I remember. I guess she's just more popular as Hybrid and about equally as good. So it lets us look at different ways to build a god, what's being picked, and what's having success.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the important things too is that this only gets us so far in balance, right? If we balanced strictly off this chart, it would not end up in a way that is satisfying for the players, right? Because the data only tells us so much. And you guys, especially, telling us your feedback is really important to us as well, whether that's on Twitter, Discord, Reddit, any of those places, Twitch chats, just in playing the god. Clearly we get that information, right? But we also want to know what you guys are feeling. So, if you think hey, Nuwa looks really good, right? But maybe she's not actually feeling that great, or, things of that nature. We can't just 100% go off the data, or we're going to be feeling bad across the board. We have to take some amount of subjectivity into this to make sure that, we're trying to appease as many folks as possible. And I think you can see just in this chart alone, with how far shifted to the left the center point of the y-axis is that we're doing a pretty solid job at making a lot of those players for these particular builds happy, because most of these guys are actually sitting quite towards the middle of the y-axis in terms of their win rate, but a lot of them are pushed super far to the right, which means they're popular, but they're just solid across the board. There's only a couple outliers in that regard.
Cool. And then I believe we have another chart here that we can look at. I'm going to pull it up. Boom.
Yeah, so this is specifically Elite Conquest, and this does not break down by build, right? This one is just raw God pick rate, win rate.
Yeah, zooming in for you, chat.
Exactly. So you can see here that, the Elite Queue, of course, is our best of the best, our cream of the crop when it comes to the players in SMITE 2 and who's actually going to be participating in these queues. And unsurprisingly, our two new gods between Hercules and Danza are occupying our most popular, but our most winning continues to be Nuwa and Fenrir.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not super surprised with the selections that are there. However, I do think that getting some more comparisons here is going to be really helpful for you guys to get a better picture when it comes to, what actions we'll need to take, right? So I think you're just getting a small taste here of the data that we get to work with. And so taking this chart plus a different chart plus what's going on in normal rank conquest and things of that nature is going to paint a bigger story. But it's nice to give you guys a very solid example of the things that we look at.
Yeah, and if you can go back to the last slide just real quick.
Yeah.
You see that the highest win rate stuff also tends to be lower play rate a lot of the time, which can mean that it's a couple really good players that are picking this build.
Yep.
And it may not even be the actual best build in the hands of most people, but that there isn't enough data so it can skew it higher. If something is both ultra high pick rate and ultra high win rate, then that's more of an actual sign that it might be broken.
Yeah, exactly. I think the more popular a god is, the easier it is for us to see, just exactly how good something is, because popularity means more data points.
Yeah,
more data points tends to mean more accuracy, less of that really extreme, really good players doing really well, not so good players not doing so well, things of that nature. So it gets to be evened out the more that they're played. So less play rate means that our number one goal should be increase the play rate to then get better data across the board, and then maybe adjust from there.
Yeah, a good example of that is Baron Tank. Up here, high win rate but low play rate. And I can think of a couple players who've been slamming some Baron support for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, on the high end for sure, definitely. But going back to the Elite Conquest, I wanted to call out Hercules in particular, just because it's kind of interesting seeing him hover around just the 50% line, especially considering all the conversation that we've been seeing, out in the community. I've seen a lot of people say Herc is super busted, best god in the game, but of course this is only after one day of play,
Yeah, and that tends to be the case as well, is that you're getting so much of one character. This happened with new releases in SMITE 1 as well, as I'm sure it'll happen here in SMITE 2, is that a character gets played so much by everybody that you're getting a little bit less of that typical performance, right? Because people want to try the new thing, but when it goes back to, the Hercules players are the only ones playing Hercules again, that will kind of show us a bit of a different number. So our really good Hercules mains, right, will definitely bring that number up, but since everyone is trying out the new OP-ness, right, is that that will affect the numbers a little bit. So I would say one thing that we take into account when we look at this balance, of course, is that there will be some change between patches just because of that nature of it, right? Is that people love to play new things, love to try new things. And that's why, in general, we like to, again, beyond just increasing the amount of new gods that we have for you guys to play with, is to hopefully give some of those guys on the left side of the board a little bit more fun things to play with, whether that's just buffs or new things of that nature. And a lot of times, skins can also influence that as well. We're not doing too many of those at this point in time, but that has been a factor in the past, is that when you have a god that gets a new skin and it's a really cool skin, like a tier 5 skin, it does increase their play rate, which again is great for us in terms of getting data. You know, it won't necessarily be the most accurate data again, because you do have a lot of that influx of everybody's playing the new thing, but more data is never bad.
Yes, absolutely.
If I can answer a chat thing real quick here.
I'm going to bring your camera too, that way people can see.
John B says, but every game has 2 Herculeses though, which means that one Herc wins and one loses every game. So it makes sense they would be at 50% win rate. These graphs are from ranked. So because this is ranked, there's only ever going to be one Hercules in a game. This graph is elite ranked. So it is the highest end players. The other graph is regular ranked. So if there were 2 Herculeses in every game, then he would be 50% win rate, but these are never looking at that because they're ranked with picks and bans.
Yeah, that is nice to have too. And we did previously in SMITE 1, when we were looking at things of this nature, we would show casuals as well. Arena would come up as well, and those do have mirror matches, right? So we could also have a filter to turn mirror matches off, do things of that nature. We're still working on a lot of those like more super nitty-gritty tools coming into SMITE 2 to be able to get all of that amazing data, but I know that Max has been working really hard on getting us some really awesome tools to really hone in on that specific data that we're looking for. But realistically, this is what we have right now to work with, and of course this is not all that we've got. We've got more on the back end as well, but this is just hopefully exemplifying to you how helpful this kind of data can be, and how we have to kind of, our job as designers and people that work on balance and things of that nature is to take these numbers and compare contrast with how the community's feeling to give you guys the balance that you are looking for.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance between perception and reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, like, with this data, what are your thoughts for what the priorities are for balance now, and what are our plans over the next few days here?
Yeah, so I think in general, our biggest priorities, of course, are going to be Dons and Herc, as they are the new kids on the block. We want to make sure that they're feeling good, and, you know, people aren't too frustrated playing as them or playing against them. And I think, you know, for Donza specifically, you saw that there were a lot of bug fixes that are on the way that we had prioritized that are coming in. So that will certainly help us get a bit of data. And that's just something that happens in an alpha, right? Is that bugs will happen. Bugs will affect win rates. That was happening with Amma for a long time, is that we weren't getting super accurate data because she was either super OP or she was disabled or, you know, whatever it might be. Those things happen. So we have to kind of roll with the punches as they come. So I have been seeing, you know, people saying, where's the Amma balance? We're still waiting on the information for that. But now that everything's fixed and we're in a good working order, that's when things can start to get kicked into gear for her. Baron is still under close watches, right? Because he was super, super good throughout the cooldown. He's been going crazy a little bit. So, in general, he's also on our list. And when it comes to the timeline of things, we're looking to hit our first balance patch on Monday. Mostly because, you know, we could do it sooner. We want to make sure that our pros have a good, solid foundation to play on for their competitive this weekend. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, you know, making sure that we make adjustments accordingly to how they're picking and banning and playing and all of the fun stuff that comes with that. So that's also on our radar to adjust when it comes to the Monday patch. And then hopefully we'll continue to patch every other day. Hopefully is the goal. You know, depending on how much need there is, if there's more adjustments or community concerns that we may have missed, we'll definitely be looking into those as they come up. So again, make sure you're giving a lot of feedback, because that is the best thing when it comes to, you know, us understanding what you guys want and what kind of balance you guys are looking for. So data is helpful, right? But it's not everything.
It's one of the classics from SMITE 1, right? Are people always think that Giannis is OP and Arachne is underpowered. And Arachne doesn't feel balanced unless she's at 60-something% win rate, and Giannis doesn't feel balanced unless he's at 40-something% win rate. So some kits are just inherently feels different than reality. So we have to balance around that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So some characters, you know, also depending on their hybrid nature, you know, what kind of items can they build? Are certain items really good right now? Like, for instance, with cooldown, we were seeing a lot of Odins and Barons and things like that, because they were just characters that either scaled with cooldown, could build all of the cooldown items pretty effectively, things of that nature. That was a literal concrete example that did happen. So things like that, again, could happen with some of this, like, strength scaling stuff that we've been talking about. So, you know, characters got nerfed and buffed according to how much of their strength scaling, you know, did impact them. A lot of times we did put their numbers either higher or lower depending on their current performance and how much that would impact them in their roles and in, you know, how they were playing. So we're looking out for, like, Onher is one, for example, that stands out a lot, as he got a pretty solid jump So that is one character that we want to keep an eye out for. But so far from this data, I'm not too surprised at where things have ended up. And of course, as the days go on, the data will only get more and more accurate and more useful for us. So I think in general, game plan, again, Monday we're planning to hit some Danzaburo Hercules at the very least, but beyond that, we'll see what other things come up over the weekend and how this data kind of evolves as we continue to go forward, what people are banning, what people are playing, and we'll move on from there.
Definitely be interesting to see what happens over the weekend with the Road to Vegas.
Yeah, and I want to address one chat comment real quick. Denise Nice, I don't know how it's said, says, why don't you nerf all base values except for early game gods and buff scaling so people actually get rewarded for what they're building? That's kind of what we have done in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1. If you look at the numbers, there's a lot more scaling in Smite 2 than there is base damage for most gods, most abilities. And then very recently, we took out your base starting strength. That contributed to your basic attack and split that into a separate stat so that then we could make things scale harder off of the strength that you are building. So that's kind of what we did in this most recent update, and we're definitely more interested in continuing to go down that path.
Yeah, especially for those strength characters, like, again, I think I mentioned, like, Susanoo and Mordred are two of the ones that, like, stood out the most to me as being impacted by this, is because they had such heavy strength scaling, and now that they're losing a big chunk of that in the early game, they're going to have to focus a lot more on their scaling, which they did get, compensation towards that in terms of their actual numbers, but it has probably affected them on this chart and beyond. So I do think in general, that's things that we're going to be looking at, is how can we better fine-tune the scaling to feel really useful for those characters that are using it, and for the characters that aren't using it or are using alternative scalings, whether that's prots, whether that's attack speed, lifesteal, cooldown, whatever these various scalings are. These are things that we want to add more of because they're cool, and also to just help the gods feel balanced for the kinds of builds that they're going to go.
Cool. Well, that was all that we had prepped today. Anything else we want to chat about, or we just want to get right into Q&A with chat?
Yeah, I think in general it's mostly balanced, but we've also got some fun. At least me personally, I'm working on some really fun God
do you
stuff
want to
behind
talk
the
a
scenes.
little bit about?
I mean, if we're all good to talk about it.
Spoilers!
Cool.
I gotta do my spoiler drum roll again.
Yeah, so for me, I've been working on Nemesis a lot, and in terms of the gameplay, right? I do get to help contribute some feedback on the artistic side, but for me, mostly it's a lot on the gameplay. So might not be able to answer artistic questions on Nemesis, but we're doing a lot with Nemesis to make her gameplay feel a lot more fluid, make it feel really clean, because she is a character that is really, really heavily focused on those basic attack cancels, right? Not like to the same extent Susanoo is, but in general, we're trying to keep that gist of really smooth, clean,
buttery,
buttery smooth basic attack cancels alive for her in Smite 2. So in terms of what we're actually changing with her, it's not all that much, right? Because she has a very simple, flexible kit as well, and that's something that we wanted to kind of emphasize going to Smite 2. So she might have some fun little scaling types in there that aren't quite your usual. Is one thing that I am willing to talk about right now, right?
Nice.
So we're aiming to give her some interesting scalings on her abilities across the board, and just keep her as clean as possible is the goal, right? So making sure those animations are feeling great. I think especially one thing we want to talk about is because Nemesis is so old, she has previously in Smite 1 only one attack animation for all of her different movement directions, right? So normally we have 8-way movement where you animate differently depending on which direction that you're going. As Nemesis, when you're attacking, you're only attacking like you're moving forward. So your legs aren't doing any of the like side strafing or directional things like that. So that is one thing that we are really heavily focusing on, is making sure that your character is feeling like she's moving in the direction that she's actually attacking in. And that's going to be one really huge improvement.
It's just a good feels change.
Oh, yeah, across the board.
Yeah, lots of interesting feels changes that I've seen you working on, including the shape of the targeter for her
her two. Yeah, Slice and Dice is essentially an ability that's a cone inside of a cone. One thing that we wanted to kind of change on that cone specifically is the placement around Nemesis. So previously, the inner cone, which is your double damage zone, that cone ended at Nemesis, which is a little bit difficult to work with sometimes as the Nemesis player because the cone is so wide, right? So you are hitting it, but if you're right next to someone, which you're a melee character that revolves a little bit around basic attacks and cancels, so you will be, and you miss the cone by just a fraction, just a little bit. And so you're not getting that damage super consistently when you're right next to someone. It's kind of like the Ymir 3 effect where like the easiest way to juke the Ymir is to go to the side of him. Just run at him. So we are adjusting that hit area as well to be pulled back a little bit closer to Nemesis. Yes, that does make the double hit area a little bit bigger, but our goal here was to try and improve that melee feel. Without, making the area too much bigger at range because, it is a quick ability that goes off. It has a pretty short pre-fire time, so she's not spending a whole lot of time casting it. We want to make sure that we're not increasing the outer area by much, but we're increasing the inner area enough to feel like you are still hitting someone that's right in front of you.
The other thing that I thought was interesting from your, one of the things we're putting a lot more focus into now is really studying the SMITE 1 character and the intricacies of the way that the character works as we're building the SMITE 2 character.
Lots of side-by-side work.
Yeah, and it's not that we weren't before, it's just that we're really trying to make sure we capture every little nuance versus saying, well, that's probably not that important, we'll do it better in SMITE 2 without paying attention to how it was done the first time in SMITE 1. And one of the things that you stumbled upon, which most people in the studio I think didn't realize was how it worked, was the way that the ult works for Nemesis. So in SMITE 1, when you ult someone, you don't actually get the protections from it until a little orb flies back to your character.
Yes, exactly. And that surprised me too. And if you're surprising me 10 years into playing SMITE, right? Especially with the character as old as Nemesis was the first character in SMITE that I ever bought, by the way, which is crazy. I was like, wow, she's pretty. So I'll buy the pretty character with the big sword. I'm down. So I did not know that about Nemesis until doing some of this research on her. So one thing, again, related to that we wanted to do is players don't really know that this mechanic exists. And it's not the best feeling in the world when you're trying to ult someone, get those protections if you're hitting a really tanky target like a Ymir. I need those protections now. I'm about to get Kuko ulted, something like that. So we wanted to keep the projectile because it's a cool visual, right? You're getting the thing from them, and that feels really good, really visceral, that you're able to physically see the thing that you're taking from them and stealing away, right, essentially. So that aspect of it feels viscerally really nice. However, we wanted to give some quality of life to it to make sure that it wasn't taking as long as it was in SMITE 1 and you were still getting close to that instant feeling that a lot of players thought that it was, while still having that visual there to tell you, hey, this is what's happening. You've stolen from this person.
That's cool.
Cool. Should we start taking questions from chat?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. There was one Nemesis question I'll hit on real quick, which is just, are you going to be changing the looks of Nemesis? I think we've seen all of the discussion about Nemesis in the community. We're working on some stuff. We'll have, I'm sure, Ben on sometime soon to show it off. But yes, Nemesis will be getting a slight visual update, but I don't want to talk too much about it right now because it's still in progress and I couldn't intelligently talk about it right now. So,
given that you're now open to faster patches, would you consider releasing individual gods earlier if they're ready ahead of schedule?
Yeah, so I think we are definitely interested in releasing things when they're ready. I don't think we'll probably release a single god by themselves, though, just because of the way that our build process works. So I think you'll probably see at least 2 gods in any release, just, again, because of the way that the process works for us. But we aren't going to wait to release the next 2 gods until some arbitrary date. When they're ready, we will release them to you.
Oh, I want to answer this On Her one. From Jax, On Her still feels extremely sluggish and its wave clear feels rather unimpactful. I do want to mention that we have on our radar, if it's not already fixed already, a bug with On Her where his wave clear was getting stopped by gods. I don't know if you guys remember way back in SMITE 1 history where On Her Impale used to be blocked completely. It was playing pretty much like that. So that does impact his wave clear quite a lot if you happen to try and, nick someone with that, or you're hitting multiple gods or things like that. If you hit one god at all, it wasn't doing any damage beyond that point. So we've either fixed that already, or it's on the triage of, making things feel better. So that will certainly impact him a lot on the graphs that we showed you guys. And hopefully his lane clear will also feel better after then as well.
It's a small thing, but it's like a huge deal.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge deal when it comes, adding up over the entire course of the game as well.
There's a question, what about icons on the damage recap? The damage recap right now is a temp screen, just to get that in the game in some way so you get that information. We're working on a pretty big overhaul to that screen right now. Probably in a month or so, I would say it'll go live. And hopefully everything will look a lot better at that point in time.
Yep. Let's see here. How fast can we expect gods to be added now? Every week? Not quite every week, but we are. It's kind of hard to answer this question because we're shifting internally too to this new mindset to where we're live patching really quickly, and the internal team is also working on things really quickly too. So I know when it's ready sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's
really true. Yeah,
truly when it's ready.
Yeah, but I think you should expect to see a few gods every few weeks, right? Which is rough, but I think is directionally right. Yeah. The last two patches, we've had 4 gods in about 4 weeks, 4.5 weeks. So we'll try and at least keep on that pace going forward, I would say.
Ooh, I have one that I'd like to answer. Is there any chance of Odin getting his rune stacks back? This is his ultimate, getting those stacks back.
I miss it personally.
I know,
Me too.
Right?
We definitely
that was one of my
it.
favorite things when I started playing way back in like season 3.
It's like, I got to kill them while they're in my... But you know what feels awful is like when you kill them right as your rings fall down. But yes, I would love to have that come back. I don't know. Go for it.
We've been talking about it internally. I know that AJ specifically was looking at it recently. I don't know the exact space that it's in right now. It might be done and just ready to go at some point, but I don't know. But we definitely agree that it's something that we've heard from the community is something that's missing. Players are missing in general, and we want to bring it back.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that when he's real good.
Yeah,
already,
he's also
right?
just really good right now, which makes it hard to add something to his kit just outright.
But I'm sure there's a little bit of give and take.
Can do a little give and take. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting question. Are there any gods you can't add due to copyright? I don't think that has come up for anybody that we have specifically talked about.
Yeah.
I will say, there have been times internally where we joke around about, I can't remember who the god pharaohs of Amonkhet are from Magic. But, we've talked about, modern pop culture gods and, that would be kind of fun.
I remember there was a thread when Steamboat Willie hit public domain.
Kind of a joke with that one.
That was definitely a joke. But other, I don't think seriously it's ever impacted us. I think that's all just been kind of more talking internally, having fun versus something we would really do. I think there needs to be some element of historical legend myth to a god.
Yeah.
And some people think still that Cthulhu is even too recent. Some people think that King Arthur is too recent.
Baba Yaga.
But those all at least have some. They've kind of risen to that level of god in modern legend in modern mythos or modern culture. And most things that are still protected by copyright, I don't know if they've reached that same level. Yeah. So and Dracula's one that comes up all the time, but we're very mixed on it internally, I would say.
Yeah.
It feels less like a character that goes in Smite for some reason to me personally. I don't know why. But I definitely see people say that. We've seen people say, Johnny Appleseed and Babe the Blue Ox and,
those tall tales.
Yeah, kind of the American pop culture things. We've definitely seen all those things. But, I think they're not immediate priorities for us.
Cool. Good question for maybe Lermy and Alex for you to tackle. How much production time goes into a god? What do the design stages look like?
Oh, gosh. It's quite the question, considering that our timeline has changed quite a bit recently. It used to be in Smite 1, at least from what I recall, working on more recent gods, it was like the total time from beginning to end of production was 9 months for a brand new god. It was
Yeah,
like the general timeline. Now it's quite a bit faster though, because well, for the most part, the base kit is done in terms of what we're expecting. Players have very strong opinions on what feels like the character now. So a lot of that like character identity searching and brainstorming, like all that stuff, like you don't really have to do in when it comes to porting a god to Smite 2. But there's still a lot of the actual framework of the character actually needs to be built, right? Nothing exists already. When we like remove things or things like aren't there, it's not that we're taking them away necessarily on purpose. It's just that some things are more technically advanced than we were expecting, or have some kind of limitation that need extra work to make them happen. So for instance, like we were talking about with the Odin thing, like that was just one thing that we needed to make sure that was fully right for Smite 2 to be able to be brought over. And so that's one thing that we agreed, like, that's something that we should put that extra time into, that is really worthwhile for those Odin players that love that aspect of him in Smite 1. So things like that do apply to other gods in the future as well. I guess though for the timeline in Smite 2, it's relatively similar in terms of like the steps, right? Yes. We still have like the brainstorming process, like what kind of new things do we want to add to these characters. We go through a feedback process with our ambassadors as well, saying, hey guys, you guys are really close-knit with the community. Like, what do you guys think of these changes? Are these going to be thumbs up across the board? Do we need to adjust anything? And then after that feedback process, we start to go into that implementation, playtest, get those visuals and sounds and animations all feeling nice and bumped up. We get some new art coming in, whether that's the card art or the icon art and things like that. And then at that point, it's just polish and publish.
Yep. And I would say the reason why it takes 9 months to make a new god from scratch is because it hits so many different teams and so many different people, right? So we have to come up with the idea of what we want to do. We have to get a concept made. We have to make a model. We have to rig the model, which is basically like putting virtual bones into it so it can be animated. We have to animate the model. We have to create the effects that go with the animations. We have to create the audio that goes with the effects. We have to do the programming. We have to design what the gameplay kit is going to be. We have to do the programming to get the kit implemented. We have to QA it to make sure it works. Marketing has to promote it. Like there are, probably at least 30 people touch any god. And it is a lot of work. And you usually can't start the next step until the previous step has been done. If you can't animate a model that's not complete, right? So it does take a long time to make new gods from scratch. It's one of the reasons why for right now, our focus, we know that the game needs a lot more gods quickly. So our focus right now is let's bring over Smite 1 gods, which we can move a little bit more quickly on, and update them where we think it makes sense and add +1s and whatnot. And then the next all new god, I think we're targeting kind of in that January timeframe for.
Cool. Saw a question: will there be visual changes to Conquest anytime soon?
Yeah, so I think there are continual changes and improvements to Conquest. I don't think there's going to be a wide sweeping visual overhaul to Conquest, like an all new map or something in the short term, because our environment art team is currently focused on building out Joust. So the Joust map is going to be an all new map. We've said it's a Arthurian themed art set on the season 3 Chinese Joust layout. Roughly, there's a few changes, but pretty close to it. So there are going to be more changes to Conquest in terms of pathing through the jungle, in terms of additional jungle potentially, in terms of new objectives to interact with, in terms of small art updates, new doodads that have been added to the map, things
more
like
set
that.
Dressing.
More set dressing.
Got to use the Christian taught me that. That's the right terminology.
More like the lighting is still something that we're continuing to work on across all the maps. But in terms of, is it going to be a completely rearted Conquest map anytime soon? No, that's not the priority. We think that the current new art priority for the Conquest or for the environment art team is getting Joust to be amazing, and then we'll probably go back to Conquest after that.
I have a funny comment that I want to mention. Can't you copy another god and modify their abilities to speed up the process? Yes, we can do that, and we have done that. The problem is that it's a problem. It's a gift and a curse, right? Because there's so much control that our developers have working in Unreal 5 and working with blueprints and the gas system, which is amazing because you can do essentially whatever you want, which is very, very cool.
Gas stands for gameplay ability system.
Yes.
Gameplay ability system.
It's a part of Unreal 5.
Yes.
It's great.
Yes. But yeah, essentially, we are able to, copy bits and pieces from gods here and there. Like, for instance, if Hades has a cone and I need a cone, I can look at Hades' cone and copy some of those pieces to make things work. But I have to be careful when I do that, right? Because there's so many things that are unique to Hades in that space. It's kind of hard to describe without you guys knowing exactly what it looks like, because it's a lot of drop downs. There's a lot of fields. Got to make sure that those things are populated, and one thing being wrong can slow down the process. So usually, and I'm just saying usually because sometimes it does work out that you can do that copying, it's usually better to make from scratch with references versus directly copying, so that you don't get any of those mix-ups here and there where you put a Hades thing in an Emesis thing, or you put a, whatever thing, just by accident. Those things will happen, and then your thing doesn't work, and you're like, why doesn't it work? And then you realize, oh, it's because I've copied from an ability that doesn't do that. And then you have to find the spot where that break happens, and it gets to be a whole mess. So
it's a really cool system. Chad, if you're interested, I believe we were featured in an Unreal Engine video.
We were.
If you want a little bit more behind the scenes look, and a look at what SMITE 2 looks like in Unreal, there you go.
I just remembered we put out that Get Good thing today.
Oh yeah, let's
Could
talk
you pull
about
that up and we talk about it real quick?
Boom, boom,
so
boom.
This is something that's really neat that we're doing behind the scenes. So we understand that in a game like SMITE, one of the worst things is when there are people who are trolling and throwing games, either by AFKing or intentionally feeding, or hacking in a way that is otherwise undetectable by our other anti-cheat solutions. And so we've started working with another back-end provider called Get Good, which is a silly name, but I did not name the company, which analyzes gameplay at a very deep level to detect when people are doing things that are bad.
Yes.
When they are throwing the game, when they are hacking, when they're doing stuff like that. And it will then let us know that these people are potentially bad and let us know that we should ban them. And this tends to be a lot more reliable than reports. Reports are great, but I quoted this today, and this is slightly wrong, but I think that in games that you lose, there's like a 70% chance that you report somebody. People just are always looking for somebody to blame for why they lost, and it doesn't always mean that that person was intentionally throwing the game just because they had a bad game. Whereas with this data, we will know a lot better if somebody was throwing the game intentionally or whatnot. So this is something it's implemented now in our back end. We're continuing to fine tune it. So I'm not saying all the problems in the world are going to be fixed overnight, but this is just another step towards addressing toxicity, towards addressing the issues that players continue to face in the game.
Of course, Twitter makes you log in to see posts, and it's the worst. 1 second. I'll pull it up.
Twitter.
Oh, Twitter.
Or, yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
What does a green name mean in game? I can answer that
that's
real
a good
quick
question.
while
We didn't
pulling
talk
this up.
about this.
So we added a new feature now where if you are linked to your SMITE 1 account through Divine Legacy, you can use your SMITE 1 account name. And if you're using your SMITE 1 account name, it will show up as green. We heard that the green name might not be the best color. Maybe it should be gold or something, so we might change it. But that is basically saying you are using your legacy SMITE 1 name. So one of the problems with the current system is that it just pulls your Steam name, and you can just change your Steam name whenever you want to. So I could change my Steam name to be Nika and be kind of falsely parading around as Nika. But in this world, you can show your Nika from SMITE 1 because I was Nika. I mean, I'm not, but if I was Nika, I could show that I was Nika from SMITE 1. So cool system. As long as you are linked from SMITE 1 to SMITE 2 through Divine Legacy, you change it in the settings in SMITE 2.
And there's a UI setting. You can switch between your legacy name and your platform name if you would like to. I know there are a few people who, I don't want my legacy name anymore. I want my platform name.
That's fine.
And I've actually got the clip of the Get Good stuff.
Cool. Just real quick, I was just going to say, you do, I believe, have to log into SMITE 1 again in order for that name to transfer over. So you'll have to have logged into SMITE 1 after CA4 came out, I believe, for that to work.
So cool. I just pulled up the raw clip without the all the doodads and stuff, and I'll just play it, Alex, and you can kind of talk about what's happening on screen here.
Yeah, so this is Get Good showing their feed of what's happening in a game. So it just showed a player get killed, right? Yeah. And it's not, I don't believe this is actually a clip where somebody was hacking or anything. This is just their visualization of the data of players moving around the map and the things that they are taking. But because they have this visualization of every player moving around the map, they then can start to look for patterns of this person is doing things that align with intentional feeding. This person is doing things that align with AFKing. This person is moving faster than they should be moving, so they're probably hacking. This person is shooting a person that they can't see, so they might be wall hacking. So this will be able to detect a lot of those kinds of things and hopefully start making the game a little bit of a cleaner place.
Yeah.
Definitely an awesome tool for our support team to
Such
help
cool tech.
expedite action on all the reports and stuff that are coming in, for sure. It's cool stuff.
Love it, love it, love it.
I'm not actually Nika. Sorry. Cool. My name usually, but not always, appears as stars instead of the actual characters. It's just letters and numbers. That's weird. I have no idea. The only reason why I would assume it would do that is if it has something that it perceives as being a slur or bad word or something.
Yeah, there's a funny story. We actually did have to work with a community content creator, Chris T. Dixon. he wanted his stream name in Smite, but it wouldn't let him do it. So maybe it's a case of that.
Yeah, it could be. And we are there are certain like standards for different platforms. We're actually required to filter out offensive names. So even if we wanted to let you put gross, disgusting things in the game, we will not. So we keep seeing this question about are there plans to give Wukong more transformations? I don't think so. I think we're pretty happy with his 3 that he has now. I will also say that the more transformations that he has, the more I don't want to call it work, but the more work it is to make a skin for him. And I think he's already kind of a difficult god to skin for that reason. So I think he's probably going to stick around with what he has now.
Yeah, I think the important thing to consider is as well on an ability like 72 transformations, the more like little segments that you have,
easy to click the wrong thing.
The harder it is to aim, especially for people like on console or using quicker instant cast and things like that. And for me personally, I already messed it up on quick cast. Yeah. So you know that making that any harder, it's probably making it harder for a lot of other people as well. So that's something to keep in mind. That's just in general. Good practice when it comes to creating god abilities is making sure that things like that feel really intuitive, depending on how far you're aiming up and down or left and right or whatever it is. If that changes the ability in any way, that feels really intentional and intuitive as to where I have to put my mouse or controller, or how I have to flick my controller as well to make that happen.
I have 2 real quick. One, I'm not going to say the name, but the person says, my Smite 1 account is banned and I can't transfer my stuff over. Surely with a clean slate, I can carry my progression over. I spent so much time and money, and I want to be able to show it in Smite 2, please. Sorry, no. We're giving you a fresh start in Smite 2, but there are impacts, there's consequences to getting banned. I don't, every case is different. I don't want to get into an argument about your specific case, but generally you have to be bad a lot of times to get banned permanently in Smite 1. So we are giving people that were banned permanently in Smite 1 the chance to start over in Smite 2 because it's been a while. Some people want to come back and do it, but we are not allowing people to carry over their accounts that were perma-banned in Smite 1 to Smite 2. And then there was a question about is Set going to come out at the same time as Horus in Smite 2? I would say no. Horus will probably be not immediate or anything, but he will probably be a relatively sooner god, I would assume. And Set, I think people read too much into me saying that he's the least popular god in Smite 1. He isn't necessarily the last god coming to Smite 2, but he's definitely not as much of a priority within his class to come over as Horus is. So I think
that has like a lot of like kind of implications as to why that is. You know, popularity does add into it, but just his complexity overall, right? Like he has some level of AI. He is a really difficult god. So as a design team, you know, we probably want to make a number of changes to him to make him more applicable across a lot of different skill levels. You know, like the people that are really good at set are really good at set and make him look crazy, but when people don't understand, you know, how his kit works or aren't, you know, the best at aiming, all of the clones and all of the various, you know, shots coming out of skewer, you know, that can be really difficult. So we want to still find some way to make him feel like set, but give him a lot more of that ability to be played by all kinds of different players and still feel a lot better, which in turn means that it requires a lot more work, which could you know, impact a lot of different teams. Like if we want to make an ability do something different, look something different, have a different hit area of things of even that small in nature, right? That does hit a lot of different teams in terms of how that would apply to his process coming from Smite 1 to Smite 2. So characters of that nature probably do need that extra TLC from the team, which, you know, does put them a little bit lower on the priority.
Yeah, cool. Quick hit, because we've talked about it before. Any stance changing gods coming? Yes, there's one in the first 50 coming up to January. I believe we talked about that in a couple.
We did. A
couple shows ago.
There's a specific bug called out here that I thought we had fixed, but maybe we haven't, and we should look into. Is Ares passive not updating until you die and spawn again? So we'll take a look at that one. I thought we had
I definitely have seen this one before come up in a Jira. I'm trying to remember if it got pushed to QA or punted or if it's fixed. I don't know the status off the top of my head, but it is something that I have seen before.
Cool. Does every Smite 2 god share the same hitbox? No. Gods have different size hitboxes.
They have different camera heights as well, and some, you know, will have cameras pulled back a little bit versus other characters that have them a little bit closer. It just depends on all the different kinds of characters that we have. Like, for instance, Martikaros is a really good example of a character in Smite 1 that has a very different camera to a lot of the different other gods and a very different hitbox as well compared to many other hunters. And so that is going to be transferred faithfully into Smite 2.
Yeah, I think actually the problem with Hercules' health bar being too high is actually that his hitbox is that high. Okay. And so that's why your nameplate just appears over your hitbox. So we just had to shrink down the top of his hitbox to match better.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the height of your hitbox isn't something that impacts too much in Smite. It doesn't need to be high enough that it gets hit while you're knocked up. But, you know, it's...
Yeah, that's been something that we've been modifying a bit, and we're still trying to kind of maintain the ratio, right? There's several pieces to the camera and the collision and the health bar and things like that. You have your capsule collision, which is essentially every god, you know, regardless of how they look, they're a little oval. They're a three-dimensional oval. And then there's also the camera, of course, and that follows behind them, but there's another aspect called the spring arm. And the spring arm is the thing that attaches the camera to the character. And so we're trying to, you know, make sure that capsule gets moved around to move the health bar into a spot that makes sense for them. But then that also affects where the spring arm is attached, which moves the camera up and down, changes the angle of the camera, which changes how a character feels by so much. Like I'm not even joking. A couple degree difference on how high or how low the spring arm is really changes that feeling. So if we make any adjustments to the capsule, we have to change the spring arm location. We have to change the camera angle, FOV, things like that to make sure that every character is feeling the same. And that has to happen if we were to change the health bar height as well, because that is directly tied into the capsule height, which is the hitbox height.
Can you match the VGS system to Smite 1, please? I think it should be matched in terms of inputs. I think the thing that is different right now on console, we don't have the same visual display. That's something that's on our to-do list to show it more in a controller layout. If there's something that isn't working right about VGS, please let us know, and we will change it.
Speaking of VGS, though, there is one thing in particular about VGS that we've got on the backlog that we're starting to put priority on, which is VGS after a game has been won or lost. You get to say your VVGGs and things of that nature. That is coming moderately soon.
Attack the Minions is missing in VGS.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, definitely. I can take a look at that.
Take a look at that. Okay. Thanks for letting us know. On console, you can't ping on the mini-map. That is a known issue and is something that we plan to get in a future update. It's more work than you would imagine. It's one of those things that seems like it would be easy, but is a slightly bigger work. So, but it is something that we know we need to do. there's a lot of talk about text chat in general. We do want to bring text chat to Smite 2. It's in the very early stages right now, so not in the next few updates at least. We also are, this is kind of behind the scenes, but in order to add text chat to Smite 2, we have to go through full certification again on consoles. So that will further delay when we will be able to have text chat for everybody. So as soon as it's done, we'll get it out there, but it's going to be a little while. The plan, just to reiterate from past shows, is you will have text chat in the pre-match lobby, in-game, and in the post-match lobby, and that's all of the text chat that we will be supporting, at least at the start. We found that people don't really use DMs and group chat and whatnot in the same way as they used to in Smite 1 because everybody just talks on Discord these days. So kind of less of a priority. But we do think it's important to have it while you're in match with randoms to be able to strategize and whatnot. The plan is not to support all chat. It's just team chat for while you're in pre-match and while you're in match, and then all chat in the post-match lobby as it used to be. All chat, even when you require people to opt into it, just tends to not be a positive experience for players. And I understand why people want it, but we tend to think that it's probably more bad than good.
Seen this question from the same person a couple times. Any plans for a tier 5 skin in January? And the answer is no. Until we get through this first set of, or getting the roster to 50 gods, we've kind of paused all work on any types of skins, not even tier 5s. So not in January.
No tier 5, no battle pass equivalent. That was initially something that we really wanted to get done, but we decided y'all probably wanted a bunch more gods instead, so we put our effort into that. So we will eventually have a battle pass, we'll eventually do more tier 5 skins. It just, for right now, the most important thing is proving to you that the game is good, that it's coming along really well, that you have faith in the direction we're going before we try and sell you anything else. So if you guys are having a great time, if you're playing the game a lot, then the cosmetic content will come.
Oh, another VGS-related thing, context pings. Context pings is something that has definitely been brought up internally. Also changing in relation to that, the ward pings to be a similar sound. That is in progress. It takes a little bit more back-end support than we have at the moment, so we are still working through the process to actually get that set up. It's all about those hookups, it turns out. We have the sounds. The sounds exist, of course, as you all know. The problem is that we need to make the place where the sound goes and have all those situations be lined up and tested and things of that nature. So we're still working through that process right now to make that stuff happen, but it's on the list.
Cool.
What about FSR or DLSS? I was actually just having a conversation about this morning. So we actually already have FSR implemented for the console versions, but it's not exposed on the PC version. So there's a little bit of work that we would need to do to get there, but probably it will be coming sooner than DLSS. DLSS is also on our... it's something that we're aware of that we probably need to get to. We already have NVIDIA Reflex support, which reduces the delay or the frame latency on supported graphics cards. And DLSS works on the same subset of graphics cards. So it's a little bit more work to get there to support it, but we are looking into it and we'll hopefully get to it before too long.
Cool. Well, we are a little bit over our 1 hour. I know we are a little bit delayed, but I know we've got to drop here in a second.
We do. Does everybody want to pick one more question?
Yeah, let's
I love
go
doing
one
the one more
more.
question.
Yeah,
because I think that's
the
a
one
fun
more
ending.
question.
Last questions.
We need like a little theme song. Last question.
Will you ever add an emote wheel? That's mine.
Oh, that would be really cool.
So emote wheels are cool, but I think what button do you put it on is the hard thing. Because VGS already occupies the button that most people would put an emote wheel on, and we don't really have an extra button on controller.
I mean, we could theoretically do VXE and then wheel input in theory, like the E brings you to the input, but then it's like an extra input on top of that. So it's kind of like but
it's a fun idea. I love the idea of being able to equip more global emotes, and that way I have one for every situation. Can I just say,
they're so funny.
The global emotes are so good.
I recently saw the Nemesis one. We were talking about her earlier, and it is very funny. It is really funny.
And one thing that we were talking about just specifically for global emotes was like, adding VXE1, VXE2, VXE3, and just letting you equip like multiple global emotes. So that would not be a wheel, but it would let you equip multiples. It's another one of those things that's more work than it seems like, but something that we've considered.
All right, that was my question.
That was your question. Lermy, what's your question?
Oh, heck. Gods I'm most excited about coming from now to January. I'm going to skip that last part. Gods that I'm excited about. Nemesis. I talked about that one earlier. I'm also really excited for Scylla. I think there was also a question earlier about gods that, we just personally are excited about working on. And that's just a character that I have loved in SMITE 1. So when we inevitably get to her, and we talked previously on a different Titan Talk about how it's difficult to get her specifically in. She's a very popular god, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know.
Technically intensive.
Technically very difficult artistically to get in. But when she's coming, let it be known. I'm going to make sure she feels exactly how she should be.
Nice.
I'm going to do 2 real quick because I think they're going to be quick. The same question has been asked quite a lot. In SMITE 1, we could zoom in and out on our characters during battle. When or if would that feature come to SMITE 2? So we've actually gotten a lot of feedback from people that they didn't like that and they would accidentally zoom in and out on characters. So that's why we didn't put it into SMITE 2. If there are a lot of people who want that feature to return, we could do it. I don't think it's actually probably too hard to do, but it just was not something that we thought people wanted in SMITE 2, and a lot of people disabled that input in SMITE 1. So something we could consider. And then the other one was, can global emotes be higher like in SMITE 1 again? The current ones aren't as high anymore. So when you're using a global emote now in SMITE 2, it will appear over your shoulder only for you so that you can see the global emote that you use. And for everybody else, it'll appear up in the sky in basically the same location that it was in SMITE 1. So it should be roughly the same experience for everybody else. It's just now you can see it yourself without having to look up into the sky after you cast it. So if there's issues beyond that, please let us know. And I think that was my my last question.
Nice.
So I think now it's time to go play some games.
Yeah.
Right?
Casual Friday's kicking off. I know Alex and I are going to be hanging out, playing some games, some SMITE 2 with the community. So if you have more questions, maybe we can take a few while we're in the player booth playing some SMITE 2 with you all.
I don't know if I can read chat.
I know, right? There's a lot.
I'm,
you got to flex your streamer mode.
I'm a boomer, dude. I can't do that.
Cool. Well, Lermy, thanks so much for joining us again
me.
for another episode of Titan Talk. Chat, thanks for hanging out. We're going to drop stream, but then production's going to pick it right back up for Casual Friday with some games with the community. But until then, we'll see you then. Bye.